Nice to say I've seen all year. On the other hand, our speaker today absolutely justifies it. So I'm Bobby Chesney. I'm the director of the Strauss Center. I'm going to shut up really quickly and turn it over to one of our graduate fellows to do the proper introductions here, but I do want to emphasize that this particular talk is part of the Strauss Center's larger effort to begin bringing to the campus more people at the intersection of law, technology, and policy and security. Today's talk will be an excellent illustration of that commitment. One of our graduate fellows is very much involved at that intersection as well. That's Ashay Rain, who's going to come forward now. Ashay is in the 4th year of his PhD program in computer science, and his own academic specialty is to examine how do you protect against what he has explained to me is called a side channel attack, and I've been learning a lot from him. It's supposed to be the other way around, but it is what it is. So Ashay, if you'll introduce our guests, we'll get underway.
Absolutely, thanks. So good afternoon, everyone. So we have with us Professor Stephen Bellovin, who is from the Computer Science Department at Columbia University. Now, if I were to just stop at that, I would be doing some great disservice to his qualifications, because in addition to being a professor, he has also been a member of some really important organizations in the past, including the Internet Engineering Task Force, IETF, the Department of Homeland Security, the Federal Trade Commission, the National Academy of Engineering, Election Assistance Commission, and in fact, just starting last month, he was appointed as the first technology scholar at the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board, what we affectionately known as the PCLOB. He has, of course, published several research papers, and I really mean several, on computer security and privacy. He also holds multiple patents. He has won multiple awards. He has written a couple of books as well on this topic. But to me personally, the reason why I am really excited to hear from him today is because Dr. Bellovin is one of the few computer science faculty to straddle the boundary between technology and public policy, and he does that extremely well. So without further ado, thank you very much for coming to UT, Dr. Bellovin, and we're quite excited to hear from you.
Thanks, Ashay. So as Ajay said, I do work in security and privacy, but also the related public policy implications. I've been working on policy stuff since the early 90s, but for the last 5 years or so, it's been about half of my research effort. And today's talk is really ripped from the headlines, as the TV show used to say, about the current debate between Apple and the FBI for access to a particular phone. But the issue is much, much larger and goes back much farther than the particular incident here. So I'm going to have to start with some technical background. I should give you a disclaimer, because I work for PCLOB, because this is an issue that PCLOB might or might not ever want to look at. These are my opinions, have nothing to do with PCLOB. I was asked to give such a disclaimer. Okay. The question that we're dealing with has become known as going dark. That's a phrase that the FBI has been using to Congress for about the last 5 years. They claim that because of the rise of encryption technology, they are in danger of being unable to solve crimes because they cannot do wiretaps, data taps, and so on because of the rise of common, easy to use, almost invisibly used encryption technology. The NSA has that problem to some extent as well, though of course their mission historically was to spy on countries that were not going to comply with any US government mandate. Can you imagine going to Stalin and saying, excuse me sir, but your ciphers are too good, could you please make it easier for us to read your traffic? This was not going to go over very well. So their customer deliberate aim. But on the other hand, encryption is necessary to protect American computers and American data. So, is there a problem? If so, what do we do about it? And it's an old debate. Cryptography first started entering the civilian sphere in this country in the early 1970s. During the period of détente, during the Nixon administration, the Soviets wanted to buy American grain. Their agricultural system had suffered yet another one of its periodic collapses. They needed more grain to feed the people. It became politically possible to buy American grain, big export market, great. Well, the American grain negotiators were representing private companies. The Soviet grain purchasers were, of course, arms of the Soviet government, backed up by the Soviet intelligence. And US intelligence reportedly learned that the Soviets were spying on the phone calls of the American private sector grain negotiation companies. Suddenly, there was a foreign policy, foreign power reason to protect American civilian unclassified data. This was quite a shock in Washington in 1972. So after due consideration, there's a proposal to have a publicly used, publicly standardized cipher. It became known as DES, the Data Encryption Standard, to protect commercial traffic and sensitive but unclassified government traffic. There weren't a lot of civilians doing crypto back then. IBM was. They proposed a cipher known internally at IBM as Lucifer, which used 112-bit keys. Roughly speaking, key size is a measure of strength. 1 bit longer is twice as hard to crack, roughly speaking. Well, this cipher went to the NSA for evaluation. Who did what is not clear from the public record, but the eventual design called for 64-bit keys after properly strengthened technically. And the NSA objected because 64 bits was too strong for them to attack. They wanted IBM to have a version with 48-bit keys, 65,000 times easier to attack. They compromised at 56. How do you balance the need to protect American data with the needs of law enforcement and intelligence agencies to intercept and track? Is there a problem? By the way, it became very clear in the late 70s that something like this negotiation took place. It was only about 5 years ago that documents were declassified proving it, but even in the late 70s, this was starting to be debated. The problem that we have from a technical perspective is that cryptography is really, really hard to get right. You will have a hard time finding a non-government cryptographer who thinks that weakening an encryption system to permit this so-called lawful access is a good idea. Because it's so hard to get right in the real world. The high-level examples, here's how you do cryptography from 30,000 feet. Here's the data, here's the key. Encrypt, what's your problem? It's not the way it really works. Not when you get down to it. And I'm going to have to divert from talking about policy to take a little bit of a dive into the underlying technology. When you do encryption in the real world, you use what's called a cryptographic protocol, a stylized set of data formats and messages that say exactly how to do the encryption, how to do it securely, what the field should look like, and so on. You know, we talk about Alice and Bob. Alice sends this message to Bob. Bob sends that message to Alice. They both send a message to a trusted third party who may or may not be fully trusted. Many different variants. Designing these cryptographic protocols is a large part of what cryptographers do. And if you get the protocol wrong, it results in security. So the very first paper in the open literature on cryptographic protocols dates to 1978 by Needham and Schroeder, two folks from, Needham is a British, I think Schroeder also. And the paper concluded, the very first paper concluded by warning, you know, this looks hard. We think that's going to be really hard to get this stuff right. And why were they prescient? It took 18 years later, the very first one that everyone studying the field would look at, took 18 years later, a new, previously unsuspected flaw was found in one of their designs that I could explain on this board in 10 minutes. It's obvious in retrospect, but it took 18 years for it to be found, and it was not found by hand. It was found with the aid of automated tools. So these things really are very, very hard to get right. Some of you may have heard a few days ago the flaw was revealed in Apple's iMessage protocol. You send iMessages from your iPhone. Some researchers at Johns Hopkins found that this is a flawed protocol. Apple's one of the most sophisticated companies in the business, and they got it wrong. It's hard to get this stuff right. Some examples. Most modern encryption algorithms work on fixed length blocks of data. It might be, for DES, which I mentioned, had to be 8 bytes at a time. What the size is doesn't matter, but if your message is shorter than that, you have to pad it out. Well, guess what? If you do the padding incorrectly, it can result in a security flaw. If you don't authenticate the message, a way to show that it's intact and hasn't been tampered with, that can result in a flaw. That was the problem with iMessage. They thought they did do the authentication check, but they did it incorrectly. They did something that looked like it was good enough, but it wasn't. You've got to number your messages in certain cryptographic protocols. This is message 1, this is message 2. I showed about 20 years ago that if you leave that out, you can get security flaws. I'll show you it was a side channel attack. Well, among many other flaws that I showed, it was a side channel attack. The odd thing was the particular protocol I was attacking was one where in the IETF I had led the push to take out the sequence number. It had been in there originally. I said we don't need it. Here's why. They took it out. Then I came back and said, oops, I found an attack. Put it back in. So. It used to be until about 2000 that it was illegal to export strong cryptography from the US. They gave up on that for reasons I'll get to later. So there were older so-called exportable algorithms, weak cryptography. The existence of accommodations in the cryptographic protocol for these weak algorithms has resulted in security flaws in the last 2 years. We haven't needed these in 16 years, but the hangover from this is still there. And the so-called additional decryption key, so the government can decrypt a message, has resulted in exploitable flaws. So cryptography is hard. In fact, I'll give an example. Let's go back to the German Enigma machine from World War II. Who's seen the movie The Imitation Game? So if you understand art history, I'll call that movie Impressionism. It gave the right overall picture, but almost every detail was wrong. It happened, but not the way the movie portrayed it. But the overall picture was correct. So here's this World War II vintage machine that the British were able to read with great regularity and success for much of the war. It turned out, why? Because the Germans were using it wrong. So you want to go send a message. First you select a set of 3 rotors from your stack of 5 or 7, whatever was prescribed in the settings for the day. And you adjust the rotors to the so-called ground settings. I have to go quickly, see, rather they're hard to turn, hard to click. And in the 50s, the British discovered, while audio eavesdropping on various embassies, that just hearing the number of clicks between different days gave away information they could exploit to cryptanalyze foreign embassy traffic and other side channel sounds. You set the plug board, this so-called the stecker board, all the ground settings, and then came the human factor. You had the operator of the machine was told, pick 3 random letters and encrypt them twice with the ground settings, and then reset the rotor wheels to those 3 random letters, and then start typing your actual message. The Germans got it completely wrong, especially at the beginning of the war. If they had used the machine correctly at the beginning of the war, the way they did at the end of the war, the British never could have coped. But they kept finding flaws and improving it, but each change was a small change that the British were able to catch up with. But if there's a machine that was theoretically good enough, what was used improperly. But a lot of flaws, some of these were in the movie. You send the same simple message every day. One general would send a message, nothing to report every day. They loved that message. Told them what to look for. picking non-random letters. You know, XXX, those are random enough, right? My girlfriend's initials, that's random enough, right? The British found those patterns and exploited them. Once someone saw a message, someone went to send some dummy traffic, just hit the letter L 50 times. That gave away that day's keys. But it turned out, and this is the one I want to focus on right now, take those 3 random letters, that they encrypted them twice instead of once was a serious flaw. Why? Suppose I picked XJ out as my 3 letters, and when I encrypted it twice, it was AMR DTJ. The cryptanalysts realized that A and D both represented X, that M and T were both J, that R and J were both M. This pattern, the relationship of A and D to each other, of M and T to each other, of R and J to each other, gave away the wiring of the rotors, gave clues to which of the 7 rotors were in use that day. The Germans didn't realize this. They said do it twice because if you lost these first 3 letters, the recipient wouldn't be able to decrypt the message. They said do it twice to make sure there's no garble. They can correct it. It made perfect operational sense, but it was cryptographically weak, and the British were in fact able to exploit it. This was one of the most important mistakes that the Germans made, in fact, early in the war. Cryptography is really hard in the real world. You had to send this though, but they were doing it in a way that didn't make sense cryptographically. So you've got to be really, really careful how you design your decryption mechanisms, your encryption mechanisms. So one of the proposed compromises suggested by the government, going back to 1993 with the so-called privilege is, if you want law enforcement to have access to this encrypted message, encrypt the message in such a way that there are 2 different ways to decrypt it. A key known to the recipient and a key known to the government. The Clipper chip was a special hardware, a then classified algorithm called skipjack, stronger than anything else that was used in the civilian world, but it had this additional decryption key property. And by the way, I'm calling this exceptional access. That's a term that's been around for about 20 years. I don't want to call it a backdoor because that's value laden on one side. You're trying to sneak into my crypto system. On the other hand, FBI Director Comey has called it a front door because we're talking about it, or a golden key, because listen, only the good guys. That's a value judgment on the other side. I'll call it exceptional access. So the Clipper chip had this design. It was designed by the NSA. And guess what? It had a flaw. It turned out it wasn't leaking data, but there was a way to use this Clipper chip in a way that destroyed the exceptional access property. It was found by my friend and colleague at Bell Labs, Matt Blaze. The NSA, with all its brilliance in cryptography, didn't realize this flaw. Cryptography is really hard. Why, from a philosophical perspective, did the problem arise? Because they were, all of their background, all of their prior art is, here's how you design a 2-party system for 2 people to talk securely. 2.5 people is a different question. They didn't have experience designing that. You don't want to design a system like that. You want to design so only the one authorized recipient can get it. So all their prior art didn't help them very much. It's a really hard discipline. And the problems are not just the weirdness of the cryptographic protocols. There's system and policy problems. For example, there is this magic secret key that is necessary to even start getting at the additional decryption. How do you protect it? How do you protect it when hundreds or thousands of law enforcement officers around the country need to get at it to decrypt data? Lots of people only need it. And maybe you can protect it against ordinary hackers. But hey, what about a major intelligence agency? Can you guarantee that when Officer Krupke comes in and says, I need this decrypted, that Officer Krupke is not in the pay of the Chinese or the Russians? Or his system hasn't been hacked, and the ciphertext that he thinks he is decrypting isn't really of the drug dealer down the street, but some dissident that the Chinese government wants to spy on. How do you know? This is a major intelligence agency you're trying to deal with here. This is a problem of a different order of magnitude. And how do you deal with the fact that you're going to take what had been something that's rarely done, and now you're turning it into a routine operation? So take the iPhone case. The Manhattan District Attorney, Cyrus Vance, has said that he has 200 iPhones in his evidence rooms that he wants decrypted. Sacramento County, only the county which I have seen public statements, alone has 80 phones. 2 counties out of what, 10,000 in the country? 280 phones need decrypted between them. It is clear that there have to be thousands across the country. And while there are certainly counties where you see very few iPhones, so here's an interesting public policy question. Android phones are much less protected by encryption for reasons I won't go into, unless you really want during the question period. I saw a chart of iPhones, Android phones. Manhattan was nice and red for iPhones. Newark, poor city, nice and green for Android phones. So you have economic distribution. Should only the rich be entitled to privacy? Very interesting policy question there. But suddenly you're going to have this routine access problem. Are the rules, the very strict processes to safeguard this key going to be followed when it's something you've got to do tens or hundreds of times a day? Will people start ignoring the rules because they know that no one's trying to hack them? You know, we all know the phrase rule book slowdown. It works because people don't follow these rules most of the time. It can really throw a monkey wrench into the works when you're trying to actually function as a society. But intelligence agencies know how to exploit it. And not just intelligence agencies. Back in the days of the Clipper chip, I was talking with an AT&T executive who had been a drug prosecutor in New York State. And she was terrified of the Clipper chip because she thought that the big Latin American drug cartels had the money and the ruthlessness to bribe or coerce the trusted individuals into disclosing this information for them. She was terrified of it. She thought it was going to compromise her internal communications. She didn't. The kind of person you think would want access to encrypted data. But she was terrified of it. Legal question. Which countries should be allowed to have the decryption key? There's one golden decryption key in the J. Edgar Hoover building in Washington, or at Fort Meade for the NSA. And now you get a request from Britain. Oh, UK? Well, sure. Trusted partner of the United States. Michael Hayden's memoir is that after 9/11, when they worried that Fort Meade itself could be hit by another plane and destroyed, who's going to run the U.S. Signals Intelligence Mission? You know who they designated? The head of GCHQ, the British equivalent. The U.S. trusts Britain enough that we'll say, okay, in case of catastrophe, you can run our crucial part of our intelligence for a while till we can regroup and rebuild. Amazingly close relationship, unprecedented in world history as best I can tell. We trust them. Now you get a request from France, which has a history of engaging in economic espionage against the U.S., our ally, but also in some cases our adversary. Israel, India, South Korea, China, Russia. Which do you trust? Yeah, China's Apple's biggest market for iPhones. And China wants additional decryption keys and exceptional access of its own. What additional decryption key should have been installed in this phone? I bought it in the US, but my daughter is living in London right now. Should her phone have a British key or an American key? Does it get installed when I cross the border? How do you do that securely? Thank you, customs agents. Here, please go do what you want to my phone when I enter China. Wonderful thought. Do it over the air from the cell towers? Twice in my personal experience, I've been in one country, but my phone was locked to a provider in a different country. It was particularly annoying in one case because the other country was using a different time zone, so Argentina and Brazil. So my phone was showing Brazilian time, and I was in Argentina. The citizenship of the owner of the phone? How's the phone know? Will countries trust each other? In a few cases, yeah, but not in general. And then there are the economic issues. What about foreign-made cryptography? The majority, according to a recent study, the majority of cryptographic products are not developed inside the US. Are other countries going to listen to this rule? I saw, just yesterday there was a report that 8 out of the 9 encryption encrypted communications packages recommended by ISIS to its members are not within the scope of US law and regulation. They're either open source or developed abroad. So ISIS is not likely to cooperate with that, but they're of course perceived as one of the biggest threats. The last time export of cryptography and exceptional access was an issue in the 1990s, one of the reasons why the government dropped its demand for exceptional access and effectively abolished the export rules was the loss of American jobs in American business. Because American manufacturers had to comply with these rules, and European and Japanese and so on manufacturers did not. So people were buying the foreign-made products because they could have stronger cryptography. And of course, if American cryptography has got these back doors, part of the exceptional access mechanisms, it's not going to be a big seller overseas. You're in some other country, are you going to trust the NSA not to spy on your communications? Imagine that the Swedish Parliament in the 90s bought an American product that had been adjusted in this way, and they were not very happy when they learned what had been done, that they were running a product that let the NSA break their crypto. China again. China was pushing hard for exceptional access mechanisms in products sold within China, including specifically iPhones. The State Department worked with Apple to push back against the Chinese government. China is Apple's biggest market. The State Department pushed back. And the Chinese government stopped condemning Apple's products as decadent capitalist tools, which they were, and it's now very popular and permissible in China. How do you say no to China when they want the same feature for their government to look at, when they have a very different idea of what constitutes illegal behavior and terrorism than we do in this country? Line I once saw is that in cyberspace, the First Amendment, the Bill of Rights, is a local ordinance. But this is going to have impact. This is a policy question. What do you want to do to the high-tech business in this country? There's another legal policy issue. Compliance with exceptional access mandates is costly. It hurts innovation. There are things you can't do that you might want to do because there's no easy or cheap way to comply. It's a wonderful example of something called CALIA, Communication Assistance to Law Enforcement Act, passed in the early 90s, and it requires a standardized wiretap interface on every phone switch. Make it easy for law enforcement to tap phone calls. It's a separate talk I won't give here. The FBI understood that ordinary twisted pair phones that had been the norm for 100 years were going away. No twisted pair attached to this didn't have this call. And now you look at Skype. The original Skype architecture, the Federal Communications Commission described as, quote, frankly bizarre, unquote. There was no place to install a CALIA compliant interface. It's just not the way the product worked. If it had been required of Skype to be CALIA compliant, it never could have gotten started. It's one of the biggest international phone companies at this point. You can hinder innovation with rules like this. I can also make a good philosophical case that you don't want the ability to search, to wiretap, to be too cheap for law enforcement. Warren Carr, professor at George Washington University, has called this the equilibrium adjustment theory of the Fourth Amendment. That when technology makes it too easy from one side to the other, the courts shift the line a little bit. If breaking into this phone is too cheap and easy, then that itself becomes a law enforcement balance issue. Justice Sotomayor, in her opinion in the Jones case 4 years ago, quoted a lower court opinion that saying that limited police resources are actually one of the practical checks against law enforcement abuse. You don't want it to be too efficient. Telescreens in every house and apartment, per George Orwell, are very efficient. It's not a place we want to go. I'm not saying that lawful access, exceptional access mechanisms are quite that equivalent. But you need to think about this question, because it is a fundamental way in practice that we maintain the tension between good law enforcement and personal privacy. Code complexity is a problem. It's a security problem and a cost problem. I won't go into this, but the code to do this stuff is complex. Complying with CALIA has de-ledger security problems. NSA at one point evaluated 26 different phone switches. Every one of their CALIA interfaces had security problems. So let's go look at the FBI and Apple. When Syed Farouk died in the shootout, they found a county-owned iPhone in his car. By the way, he and his wife had 3 cell phones. They physically destroyed 2 of them. Guess which ones might have had sensitive data? The ones that were destroyed are the one that didn't. The county, the owner of the phone, gave consent to the search. The FBI had a search warrant. But the phone was locked. And there's a feature on iPhone that says if you enter the wrong PIN 10 times, it's going to erase the data on the phone. So Magistrate Judge Pimp ordered Apple to release software that would allow unlimited guesses and allow the FBI to enter it rather more rapidly than having an agent sitting there at the screen. Apple objected. Why? Why do they want to, quote, protect the privacy of a dead terrorist? It's not about one phone. It's not about this one phone. There is, the odds on them being useful information on this phone are quite low. Apple knows every app that was on the phone, whether or not there's a secure communications app. The FBI has indicated, the county sheriff said they don't think there's anything useful on the phone, but it might be. Building the infrastructure to unlock this one phone is time-consuming and expensive. But once the code exists to do it, unlocking the next phone and the next one and the next one becomes very, very cheap and easy. Apple and the FBI both understand this question. The FBI wants to set a precedent, a legal precedent, in a case where it looked like all the factors and all the public sympathy was going to be on their side. And Apple's afraid of this case for exactly the same reason, because there are going to be more dubious cases. So how expensive? Apple's estimate is 3 to 10 person months to build this code. My own independent estimate is squarely in the middle of that estimate, and I forgot about management time and documentation. So I find their estimate extremely plausible. All code to run on an iPhone has to be so-called digitally signed, cryptographically signed by Apple, using a cryptographic key that only they possess. But the cost, again, for this first version of code, 10 person months to produce the first version, but the next one is a matter of seconds to minutes. And Apple has said, and I think they're correct, if the software is locked to one phone the way Judge Pimp's order said it should be, well, trigger will produce the next one. But once the software exists, it can easily be stolen. And if the generic software is not locked to one phone, then because you've got these thousands of requests coming in, then you've got the routinization problem. And it will become the target of hackers from other major governments, because China wants its own ability to read these phones. Not just its own citizens, but say, Western business travelers and government officials entering the country. Excuse me, ma'am, excuse me, sir, we need to go do a customs examination of your phone. Border search, you know about the border search exception. It's in your law too. We need to examine your phone to make sure you're not smuggling in evil things. Thank you. Anytime. It is locked to one phone, you've got the routinization problem, producing these. Okay, here's phone serial number 23578. Okay, I'll produce a copy. 12897, produce a copy. Tens, hundreds of times a day. There's another interesting legal issue. Is computer code speech for the purposes of the First Amendment? 3 different appellate courts have looked at the question, the Second, Sixth, and Ninth Circuits, and all 3 concluded that, at least under certain circumstances, computer code could be speech, could be protectable under the First Amendment. Ninth Circuit opinion withdrawn for procedural reasons. In all 3 of these cases, by the way, the code was linked to a political issue. But Apple has expressed an opinion that this backdoor code is ethically a wrong thing to do. This is a political statement. Can they be compelled to speak the code to do something they regard as ethically wrong? Compelled speech on a political issue, in its ordinary speech, that's an open and shut First Amendment case. Is computer code speech? As I said, 3 different circuit courts concluded that it was. Well, what about the digital signature? When Apple signs the code, are they making a statement? We attest to the quality of this code and that it meets our standards. The technical equivalent of a good housekeeping seal of approval. You can't compel that under the First Amendment. Or is it a simple functional access control mechanism? Only this key fits the lock and you can come in. Which is it? No court has ever ruled on that. Apple will note, by the way, that code signing ability is crucial to why iPhones are more secure than Android phones. So the FBI has said, well, if Apple won't cooperate, we're going to subpoena the code and the signing key. Lawyers I've spoken to have said, yeah, subpoenaing the code, probably legal, probably plausible. It's not easy for somebody else unfamiliar with the code base to use it as some might think, but any competent programmer of that kind of work could figure it out within a few weeks. But what about the signing key? You still have the compelled speech issue. Can Apple be forced to disclose the key? Well, they may not even have the ability to do so. Signing keys, according to best practice, are supposed to be embedded in something called an HSM, a hardware security module, whose sole purpose is to prevent disclosure of the key. So Apple may not be able to turn over the secret cryptographic key if they wanted to. And again, you've got the whole compelled speech issue. The data was backed up to iCloud, at least up to 6 weeks before the attack. iCloud backups are not encrypted. Why not? Apple was worrying about theft of a device, not hacking. They're probably going to change that. Customers want to recover the data if they've forgotten their PIN. Apple's a consumer company, not a defense contractor. But what happened with the phone during those 6 weeks? Well, it turned out that iCloud probably could have forced Farouk's phone to take a new backup. But the FBI made a technical mistake. Early on, they changed the password. So, Director Comey said, yes, a mistake was made. Not we blew it, a mistake was made. Apple knows exactly what apps are on the phone. I assume the FBI knows it also, courtesy of the subpoena. They know whether or not there are any secure communication apps that might have data that wouldn't be on that iCloud backup. You know, did Farouk download Telegram or Signal, an encrypted communication app, during those 6 weeks? Apple knows that answer. But this is why people suspect that there's no useful data on the phone. It's an ideological issue. Tim Cook personally strongly believes in privacy. I don't know the man, never met him. But he grew up gay in rural Alabama. I think you understand, I personally suspect that he understands the need for privacy better than most people, given his own environment. And he also has a strong personal belief in speaking out against injustice. As a child, he witnessed the Ku Klux Klan cross-burning and tried to get them to stop. Whether that was naivety, stupidity, or bravery, I don't know. But again, this is documented episode in his past. Phones have a tremendous amount of sensitive data on them. Supreme Court opinion Riley 2 years ago. With all they contain, all they may reveal, they hold for many Americans the privacy of life. Privacy of life. So a news story just yesterday that people more willing to confide sensitive medical information to their phones than to their doctors. There may even be a marketing issue. That's what the FBI is claiming. Apple has tried using this as a distinguisher from Google. Google makes its living by using your personal data. Apple makes its living by selling you shiny toys. I suspect it's all. But more importantly, from a policy perspective, it's not just privacy and security. People have a lot of sensitive information on their phones. If I want to go read email from some sites, I have to go do something on my phone. Phones are authenticators. They have bank account information, email passwords, and so on. By protecting the phone, you're protecting this data. Not just personal privacy, but corporate data. Business data too. BlackBerry rapidly losing market share, employees are doing BYOD, bring your own device to work. So it's corporate data that's at risk. If we weaken the phones, we're imperiling this corporate data and probably government data. I know one person for a government agency could use his iPhone to read his government email. You can use your phone as an authentic. How many of you ever used an RSA secure ID token? It's a little fob thing that displays a code that changes once a minute or so, used to log into corporate or government networks. You have to carry an extra little thing like your keychain. Guess what? You can get an app on your phone to emulate that same function. That's on the phone also, that data that's suddenly exposed. And now you're an American business executive crossing the border into a country with an oppressive government. And that government can unlock the phone if their border exception to search. Well, this particular case may be moot. News reports, the FBI asked for a 2-week delay in the court hearing because some outside party, reportedly an Israeli company, has offered them technology to get at this particular phone. If the rumors and speculation are correct, it's a technique that will not work with any iPhone newer than Farouk's. Apple is reportedly going to be strengthening their security in any event. The case is going to come back in court. This case may be moot, but it's going to come back. We need to have a public debate on this question. There's been inadequate public debate about the extent to which access to metadata, who's calling whom, can be a substitute for access to content. Michael Hayden, former director of both the NSA and the CIA, has said that metadata is really, really good. Quote, we kill people with metadata, unquote. Unofficial motto of the NSA during the wars in Afghanistan was, we track them, you whack them. Some of the analysts were rather uncomfortable. That was not what they signed up for. But metadata is extremely powerful. With enough metadata, you don't need content. Hayden and a few other top former national security officials. Michael Chertoff, former Secretary of Homeland Security. McConnell, not the senator, but former NSA director. They call this the golden age of SIGINT, the golden age of surveillance. We have so much metadata and so much other data that access to this content is at most a marginal aid, and it carries security risks. So what do we need to do? What should we be doing about this stuff? We need a public debate. But the debate thus far has been frustrating. It's been between lawyers and policymakers and law enforcement officers on the one hand, and technologists on the other. I have personally sat in a room in closed meetings and said, okay, if we say you need access to phones, How many phones? What frequency? How rapidly do you need the answer? Can you triage the phones to say which are more important and which are less important? No, we don't have that data. As an engineer, wearing my practical engineering hat, I cannot design a system if I don't have good requirements. But I also find it very frustrating to talk to someone who's maybe taken one programming course and tried to explain about side channel attacks on cryptographic protocols and the complexity of software because they don't have the technical background to understand just how hard this is. I need to talk to a technologist who can give me technical reasons why my fears are unfounded. So the two sides are talking past each other because there are not enough people who understand both languages. And this is what my suggestion, request to the people in this room. The country, the world needs people who are interdisciplinary. The older I get, the less interested I am in narrowly educated people and narrow field boundaries. Because things like this do cross disciplines. And computer scientists, traditionally been a very narrow profession. Engineering oriented, very narrowly focused. Only the physicists, and to some extent the biologists, have really engaged, in the technical community, have really engaged much in public policy. The physicists from the legacy of the A-bomb during World War II, biologists more recently understanding the issues of DNA and what could happen from tinkering with DNA. But other scientists and engineers have stayed out of this. We're starting to see the climate scientists getting very involved and speaking out. But we need more people. We need people who can understand how to speak the language of a policymaker, of a lawyer, of an economist. Yes, temperature is rising. Don't tell me your ideology doesn't believe temperature is rising. It is. The ideological question is what to do about it. We need people who can talk about questions like that. So, that's my invitation to you. Further reading on the issue, two papers, reports, whatever, one from '97 during what some was called the first crypto war, I would actually call it the second, and more recent one, which put out this summer, as a co-author on both of them. And my friend and colleague Susan Landau testified before the House Judiciary Committee a few weeks ago. You don't have to write this. These slides are going to go up on my webpage tonight, so you'll be able to download it and get hold of these readings that way. So, any questions? Yes?
Within the past couple months, I remember reading about some folks who I think were at the University of New South Wales in Australia, who figured out how to perform quantum calculations on silicon chips that they could embed and integrate into digital computers. And from what I understand about quantum computing is that it lends itself particularly towards problems in cryptography. If that technology were to become ubiquitous, what effect would that have on the status quo of encryption and security abroad?
Okay, so quantum computing has been a theoretical notion for about 30 years. Quantum physics is seriously strange. There's the thought experiment called Schrodinger's cat. You put a cat in a sealed box with a Geiger counter and a radioactive atom, and the best physicists understand it's even theoretically impossible to know if a particular atom of uranium is going to decay at a certain time. But they know statistically with great accuracy that in a certain amount of time half of them will decay. But you cannot tell even in principle whether or not a particular one will decay. This is what the laws of nature seem to say. So you put the cat in the sealed box with the Geiger counter and the uranium hooked up so that if there is a decay at a certain point, a vial of cyanide will be opened to kill the cat, and if it doesn't decay, then the cat is alive. So is the cat alive or dead? And the answer, according to a physicist, the only way to tell is to open the box and look. And until then, the cat is simultaneously alive and dead. And it's called Schrodinger's. Quantum mechanics is serious. Well, about 20 years ago, a guy named Peter Shor, I used to work with him at AT&T Labs, showed that all modern public key algorithms could be cracked very efficiently if we had a quantum computer. More so-called conventional algorithms can also be cracked with that, but with a quantum computer, but not more efficiently than with a conventional computer, but not as efficiently. Well, what do we do about this problem? And about 6 months ago, the NSA started worrying publicly about it. Do they know something we don't know? They say not, but who knows? I've heard this one both ways. But they have information. They want to design systems that can be out in the field for 30 years and protected data that's got to be classified, protected for 30 years after that. So they're looking out 50 or 60 years. They said, okay, we have to start thinking about how to build so-called post-quantum algorithms. And what is the state of the art? Can we develop post-quantum algorithms? For conventional ciphers like AES, the Advanced Encryption Standard, as far as we know, it's fairly straightforward. Use a log and key length. That one's under control. Public key algorithms, we don't know how to do it. Or rather, there are some algorithms that are out there, but they haven't been well studied enough, and they have some undesirable properties. No one's ready to declare a standard yet. But if a large quantum computer can ever be built, all the traffic is protected with public key information, going back for as long as we've been doing this, and going forward for, call it the next 10 years before we get the quantum stuff deployed, we'll be at risk. Look what? Yes.
Can I invite you to speculate on what the company, whoever it is that's helping FBI, speculate on what sort of attack they might have in mind, or what kind of vulnerability they could use to enable
So-
what you have in the password?
Okay, so by chance I have a backup slide that helps me answer that question. I did not know this was coming. Here's how encryption on the iPhone actually works. There is a large random number, 256-bit number, called the UUID, that is manufactured into the processor of the iPhone. It's manufactured in, it's random, it's not predictable, it's not recorded by Apple, and it cannot be accessed from the outside. Or not relaunched, not easily. When you unlock your iPhone and type in the PIN, there's a cryptographic process to combine the PIN and the UUID. The process takes about 80 milliseconds, cannot be speeded up, to produce an encryption key called the KEK, the key encrypting key. The key encrypting key has one purpose in life, it's to encrypt something called the DEK, the data encryption. And the data encryption key is used to encrypt the stuff that's on the phone. Well, where is the encrypted DEK stored? And on older iPhones, the iPhone 5C and before, it's stored in the flash memory of the phone. This is what you pay attention to when you want to know how many pictures or songs or movies you can store in your phone. It's stored in the flash memory, separate chips on the phone. The UUID is in the CPU, that's one chip. The flash memory is in another chip. And the best guess by people who understand the hardware of the phone much better than I do is they're going to pop out the flash memory. It's encrypted, but you can make a copy of it. You make a copy of what's on the flash memory, and you put it back into the phone and start doing the decryptions. And if the phone says, oops, wrong key, and erases it, you just restore from your backup copy. Because you popped it out, you can just go put a new copy in. And then you can just keep repeating this. Ways to speed it up, ways to do it more efficiently, not particularly relevant. The essential point, though, is you cannot compute the KEK without the UUID in the PIN. But UUID is stored on the CPU. So the attack notionally should work, given what people outside Apple know about the design of the phone. This Israeli company is in the forensics business. They do understand how iPhones work. They built tools for earlier iPhones and so on. So it's very, very plausible that they have this technology, not just at a high level, but actually engineered and working. Newer iPhones have a special secure area in the processor called the secure enclave, where the DEK is stored. It's not stored on the flash memory anymore, so this trick won't work on newer iPhones, if this is the design. Other ways to get at it is something called decapping a chip. You can start peeling off the layers of the chip and get in there with ultrafine probes and actually read out areas of the chip. This is a very delicate, high-risk process, which has a high risk of actually destroying the contents of the chip. And once you lose it, it's gone forever. So the FBI does not want to try this if there's any other alternative. Again, this is what is the speculation I have seen online by knowledgeable people. But the best guess is it's a backup restore notion. Again, it's a guess. No one's even confirmed that. This is a good for Israeli company, Celebrite. We'll have to see. There are also rumors that the FBI has classified the technique. Good luck trying to classify a technique that developed abroad by a company whose clients are worldwide. But so I don't know that I believe that part of the story, but that's the story that's out there. More questions? Yeah.
So if it turns out that the court is able to force Apple to create this exceptional access, do you think there's going to be an influx of homebrewed and third-party organizations who want to step up and fill that gap?
Yes. Okay. There are two parts to the question. One is this software that Apple will be forced to create. Could they be forced to create a special version to do the encryption for this particular phone or like situations? If the court says yes, you have to decrypt this particular phone, the software will exist. As long as there is no law prohibiting Apple from doing better, they're going to upgrade their software to make it impossible for them to create this in the first place. Remember what I said about the secure enclave? Right now, even if they had the secure enclave on this particular iPhone, Apple could just replace the software from the secure enclave in a way to go make it leak all this information. But there are two other possible designs. One says, if you want to replace the secure enclave code, you have to enter the PIN. Another says, if you replace the secure enclave code, we're going to erase all the data it's in and go restore it from your iCloud or iTunes backup. Both are technically feasible. And as long as there's no law against that, Apple is probably going to do it, at least according to reports, to protect themselves from this in the future. Is the larger public policy question of will Congress pass a law requiring permanent exceptional access features to be built in? You know, Apple, like any other company, has got to comply with the law. Third party filling the gap, that's a more interesting question. Apple, this is where Apple's signing policy might come back to bite them. Right now, you want an app in the App Store. It won't install on your phone unless your phone's been so-called jailbroken. It's not signed by Apple. Apple has certain requirements. Would the law say that Apple would not approve a secure app if it didn't have its own exceptional access provisions? What's the law going to say? Apple will fight this one bitterly. If Apple loses this fight, people who care about this will start getting third-party software on Android phones where you don't have nearly the strong protection of the signing requirement. There's a Google App Store with signing, but for various technical and market reasons, it's a lot easier to get around than it is with Apple. So I don't know where that one's going to go. There will be other things springing up, and can I download something from the British iTunes store? Or, well, Britain will probably go along with this. Maybe I'll go to some other country which has looser rules on this. Finland. I don't know. We don't know how it's going to play out, especially internationally. We don't know what the judge will rule or Congress will rule. Yeah.
I guess I wonder what has the FBI given up? Because they always had the ability to download the backup from iCloud. They always had the ability to figure out what the PIN was, because you only have 10,000 pins, And how long is it gonna take to get 10,000 pins if you turn the phone off? So for a long time, I'm sure they knew that, but they still pursued this, and now they're not pursuing, or they delayed the case. So what are they really trying to do? Could you enlighten us about that?
Their real goal is to get a legal precedent compelling Apple to cooperate, whether it's manufacturing in the exceptional access mechanism or cooperating with each new instance. They very carefully picked a case where they thought that all of the facts and public sympathy would be on their side. It's not about one phone.
Right.
Now, until iOS 8, which came out about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I think about a year and a half ago, Apple didn't encrypt as much, and therefore you popped the flash out or just loaded, didn't do software load, and it was easy to extract, and Apple was cooperating. They've gotten tired of doing that. There's another case in Brooklyn where the judge ruled against the FBI, where it's a case where Apple does have the technical ability to do so. He ruled on legal grounds, something called the All Writs Act. He says does not empower the FBI to get this order. That's a legal question I'm not competent to comment on. But Apple has periodically been strengthening. iOS 8, they started encrypting a lot more. You need this UUID. There is the erase after 10 wrong tries issue, which would...
But you could turn it off. You could turn the
you can
phone
only turn
off
it
and
off.
start over
You
again.
can only turn it off if the phone's unlocked. You can't turn it off on a locked phone. In fact, even on a phone that's unlocked, if you try to turn off that feature in settings, it's going to prompt you for...
No, just turn the phone off.
I'm
And
sorry?
then turn the phone off. There's
Well,
tools that do that.
that's one way to get around the 10 try limit for older versions of iOS, but Apple fixed that. In fact, Celebrite was the one that pioneered that technique.
Mhm.
Do 9 tries, turn off the phone and reset it before it can record the fact that you've done it 9 times. So Apple has been fixing these flaws as they come in. And you're actually not limited to a 4-digit PIN. If you have a phone with a fingerprint reader, these days it insists on a 6-digit PIN, and you can actually make the PIN as long as you want in letters and numbers if you want. So it's not, most likely for whose phone is 4 digits based on most people's behavior, but it's not clear. And District Attorney Vance says that word is out on the streets of New York, get an iPhone, the cops can't break in. And maybe the word will be out, get an iPhone and pick a longer PIN. He will say that, probably will be true, I don't know. But again, I don't have the engineering numbers on this.
I mean, politically, they've given up, has the FBI sort of given up the legal piece
They have
to
not
fight
given-
another,
They
to
have
fight
not
another
given
day?
up the legal piece, but given that they have this offer, they have to investigate. Sentiment has been shifting against public sentiment seems to be shifting against the FBI. They may be looking for another alternative, they may look for another case, but this issue is not going to go away. Like I said, they've been warning about going dark for 5 years. They've been railing about Apple since iOS 8 came out a year and a half ago. It's not going away, it's going to come back. It is unclear what, if anything, Congress is going to do. Apart from the issue of Congress not liking to do very much these days, this is an issue that does not split along Republican Democratic lines. It's an issue where Tea Party libertarians are getting along with civil libertarian left-wing Democrats, and it's the two ends against the middle. So it's a much different split than usual. We may actually get a Congress that returns to its older way of cooperating with compromise. So it's a very different political issue. Congress might or might not act, but I cannot predict.
Sure.
Congress, the Judiciary Committee hearing that Susan Landau testified at 3 weeks ago was extremely unusual in that most members of the committee were criticizing the FBI. The FBI has got tremendous political capital in Congress. To see them being criticized and treated fairly harshly and questioned a lot by Congress was quite an unusual spectacle. And Landau's testimony actually didn't say the FBI is bad. She said the FBI doesn't have enough technological expertise, give them more money. So how often do you see the spectacle of someone criticizing an agency and saying they need more resources? So it's going to play out in a very unusual fashion. There's also a jurisdiction fight going on in Congress. What committee should control this? Should it be the Homeland Security Committee, the Judiciary Committee, the Intelligence Committee, the Commerce Committee? They all have fingers in the pie, and there seems to be a bit of a turf battle going on right now in Congress over which committees will have jurisdiction, and that will also affect. The fact that you've got this turf battle, that might prevent Congress from acting. I talk to people who are more wise in the ways of congressional politics than I am. There's speculations that this turf battle will prevent Congress from doing anything in the near term. But again, this issue is not going away. We thought it was settled in 2000, it's back. We'll have to see where it goes. Yeah?
Which allied country do you think we're the most out of step with in terms of our policy towards encryption?
It's hard to say. Cameron's government in the UK wants to crack down even more than the FBI does, given the way parliamentary democracy works. He's likely to win that fight. The EU Court of Human Rights is quite possibly going to come down on the other side and say that this kind of privacy is a fundamental human right, in which case by EU law, countries have to comply. On the other hand, the UK is about to have a referendum on withdrawing from the EU. So you're getting very different behavior in different countries. In France, the lower house of the parliament there did pass an exceptional access law, but the analyses I've seen, I don't know, of course, it's unlikely to make it through the full parliament, let alone be enacted into law by the president. Countries with more libertarian tradition, I would guess Finland, the big high-tech country, is not going to go along with this. Switzerland, probably not. It's hard to say. Israel is more of a high-tech power, more cooperative relationship between the high-tech companies and the government. Hard to say just which way Israel's going to go. Japan, I don't really know this. Germany is probably not going to go for this. Germany, reaction to 12 years of Nazis and then the Stasi in East Germany has created a very strong public backlash against overreaching government power, intrusion into privacy. So I would be surprised if Germany went along with this. The Netherlands has come out against exceptional access. So I can't do it. There is a lot of split, there is a lot of tension. It is being debated without the rest of the conversations. So I can't really predict how it's going to go. High tech is, of course, centered in the U.S. Google and Apple are American companies. But Microsoft's American. Microsoft is actually, most of Silicon Valley is lined up behind Apple for lots of reasons. Even Google, which wants access to data for its own reasons. Yeah.
I've got a technical question for you, but I want to postulate it in the context of the scenario. So let's say we had a series, one large or a series of catastrophic terrorist events in the United States, and this debate that or dialogue that you're calling for occurs. Is there a technical solution that would allow, on a one-off basis per device, you to attack this problem? Or the things that aren't in the system now, like, for example, another key that, an interesting point of your story is, and this whole case is that Apple can break this phone. There's not a big debate about Apple breaking the phone. So people aren't outraged that Apple could break the phone. They don't want the government to break the phone. So is there a way that one could technically solve this problem?
So that's a really interesting and really difficult question to answer. One of the things that, when I teach a security class, I teach my students, the first question to ask is, what are you trying to protect against whom? You need different defenses if you want to protect against Hollywood stereotypical teenage hacker down the street, one who lives on pizza, Coke and lives in his, and I stress the word his, parents' basement.
It's actually Mountain Dew, but.
Okay. Mountain Red Bull to get worked out in, or you're trying to protect against a major intelligence agency. China gets all the news. Director of National Intelligence Clapper said he's more scared of the Russians, probably because they're not quite as noisy, but maybe because they're better and don't get detected. You need different skills to protect, and different things to protect against them. But the other implicit in that question I teach my students to ask is that security is a matter of economics. What does it cost to crack one phone, to crack many phones? What is the marginal cost for cracking an additional phone once you've built the infrastructure? And these questions are very, very important, but the answers are going to matter differently against different threat scenarios. You might end up with a solution that says iPhones are not rated against national governments, but it's going to take 24 hours inherently by the physics of the design to crack each phone. And that mostly gets rid of the border search thing. Customs agent can't go up into a back room, come back 5 minutes later with your phone.
Right.
But we have to answer that question of who is the enemy. Software solutions will rarely, if ever, have, pure software solutions will rarely, if ever, have a high marginal cost aspect to it. It takes something like a secure enclave, where the hardware is limiting the guess rate. In order to get a high marginal cost solution. Technically speaking, it is easier to have selective access to a physical device than to an encrypted communication. Traditional decryption keys for communication are fiendishly hard. It's a lot easier technically for a device because the attacker isn't present when the encryption is taking place. It can't influence the way the encryption takes place. It can't observe anything. I'm not saying it's easy, I'm saying it's easier. So there are a lot of different parameters to the solution. But again, this is why I want to engage with technical people on the government side to understand what the real requirements are. There was a Senate hearing in July on this issue, and one of the things that came out in this hearing that had not been clear, at least to me, was that the NSA cares about communications, local police care about devices, and the FBI cares about both. Probably more devices, but they do care about communications as well, because they've got a counterintelligence role, they eavesdrop on the mob, and so on. So different groups have different needs, different kinds of enemies, different kinds of attackers. Again, I need parameters for an engineering solution. None of this makes me happy, but I'm a security and privacy guy, and I worry about the security of information on the phones, not just from a personal privacy perspective. We're already in a situation where the New York Times could report, as it did 2 years ago, that high-level business and government travelers are told, do not bring your smartphone, do not bring your laptop to China. Get a burner phone, get a burner laptop, don't go access your regular email account or corporate network while you're in China, because it will be compromised. And, I better not give the details, but I have talked to people in the know who have witnessed tampered devices coming back from certain countries. And how much should a consumer device be engineered to go resist a foreign government? Well, we learned in 1972 that foreign governments are interested in commercial data, and this has national security, national policy implications. I call this phone my auxiliary brain. I feel crippled without this thing. And traveling to another country, I'm trying to engage in a high-level business, and I can't communicate securely with my staff back home. That's a considerable handicap to me as an executive. One of many questions in the policy debate is, what are the parameters that we really want to secure and against what threats? And this question has to be answered. And I hear about what looks to be lone wolf self-radicalized terrorists. I hear anecdotes about child pornography, and these are real. I don't doubt the veracity of it, though some of the stories have not stood up to a closer examination. But I need data, not anecdotes, if I want to engineer a solution. If I want to have a public debate, what percentage of cases is this really the important information? And how much, the FBI should have a role of preventing crime, not just solving it. And if the phone is weaker, if this enables more crime than prevention, more serious crime, that's an issue too, that's a policy issue. We need to debate it in those terms, not just one story that District Attorney Vance told. He knew of a murder where he believed that the victim's phone had recorded the murderer killing him. And he can't decrypt the phone to get at this video to show who pulled the trigger. Well, okay, I don't think that happens very often. And, there were 5 other people in the room. They don't want to talk to the police, but this is not a technical issue. This is a law enforcement issue and distrust of police and racially charged issues and so on. It all fits into a broader picture. And I don't want to enable the Russians to get into a major corporation because of a gang murder in Chicago. It may not be the best trade-off from a societal perspective, but I don't know. I want data. And I want data, I want to speak to technologists, I want to talk to people with data. Yeah.
So you mentioned China. It got me thinking about Stuart Baker, and as we all know, who follow this issue, Stuart got a lot of attention for writing that open letter to Tim Cook saying, let's turn this around on Apple. You said all these pro-privacy things, but what compromises did you make to get to the Apple market? There were.
Stu Baker, for those who don't know, he's a politically active lawyer in Washington. He used to be general counsel of the National Security Agency, served the Bush administration, Homeland Security. He's now back in the private sector, but still politically very, very engaged. I haven't examined the factual basis of his assertions. Apple has denied a lot of them. I think I would leave it at that. Apple has denied making these kinds of compromises with China that would compromise privacy. He claims they have, Apple claims they have not. It might be interesting if either one of them had to testify under oath in a deposition, but or on the stand or before Congress. But right now, all I can say is that the facts are actually in dispute, so I don't know how to. Baker, he was actually general counsel of the NSA during the Clipperton days, so I was sparring with him then, and he was making comments then that did not go over very well with the privacy community. That said, idiots do not become general counsel of the NSA. He's a very smart man who has his own political agenda and political beliefs. And some of the things that he said have been fairly far out there, such as whether or not current law permits U.S. companies to hack back against attackers. He says it does. Most other lawyers I've talked to say it does not. So take this as you will. And look more to this side. Any questions from over here? Yeah.
One question. The phone that in question was an employer-issued phone, and you worked for the San Bernardino County?
Right.
Okay. Well, if they had a proper MDM solution in place, they would have been able to unlock the phone.
Yes, okay, so MDM is mobile device management. If you have a corporate-owned device, your employer's typically going to want software on the phone to let them control it to a greater or lesser extent. That's one of the reasons for BlackBerry's success early on, is that they had really good features for corporate control, enabling and disabling certain functions of the device to accord with employer policies. Apple has an MDM solution for iPhones, not as powerful as BlackBerry's, but good enough. San Bernardino County did pay for and install such software on Farouk's phone, but they weren't using it. From everything I can see, it was not a state-of-the-art, high-class IT operation, and they were not using this feature that they actually paid for. If they had used it properly, they could have reset the pin on this phone. If they had used it properly, Farouk could not have downloaded his own apps. I'd put it on the phone, because typically your employer is going to want to to control that, because you're not supposed to be playing Candy Crush on your county-owned phone.
Well, the agency that I work for, we have a policy of corporate-owned, personally enabled phones. So essentially, we purchase the phone, we issue the phone. We actually do have an MDM solution on the phone for secure email browsing. But we basically leave it to the judgment of the user to.
All kinds of policies, you know. Baker, in fact, asked, well, what about MDM? Doesn't this weaken the security of the phone? Isn't this a backdoor? My answer is yes, it does. But this is a decision that an individual corporation can make, balancing its own security needs with, frankly, the happiness of its own employees and the risks it perceives to the phone. I'd be much less likely to want to take an MDM-enabled iPhone to Russia or China than one that doesn't have it, because MDM is a backdoor. But when you start doing it at the national level, the world level, you're making one decision about the trade-off that has to apply to everybody, and you're exposing everybody's phone to very powerful attackers. You know, maybe I may, well, give an example I saw. Paper clips, mostly a domestic U.S. manufacturing product. Why? It's not something amenable to high-tech solutions. It's heavy to ship from abroad. The infrastructure's here, it works. Why bother outsourcing to China? It doesn't make economic sense. You probably don't have the Chinese and Russian governments interested in taking over 100-year-old, literally, paperclip manufacturing technology. I can make a different decision as the CIO of a paperclip manufacturer than I would if I were the CEO of, say, Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin, Marietta, or Apple or Google. You want to make different decisions. And I don't think this is a good decision to make nationwide, because it completely eliminates the what are you trying to protect and against whom trade-off from the discussion. Yes, it introduces a weakness. The authentication key to the nationwide MDM solution becomes a prime target for foreign intelligence agencies. I don't think that's a good trade-off. Yeah.
I hesitate to ask this question because it sounds so cold, and I probably should have asked it in an earlier lecture, but you mentioned the word cost. Is it ever discussed when we're talking about national security about how much it costs to save one life from a terrorist? And because in a previous lecture, they were talking about foiling 100 plots in the last 8 or 10 years. And I started thinking, well, how much have we spent on that in the last 8 or 10 years, and what does it cost per life?
Cost is an issue that's rarely discussed publicly, but used all the time by policymakers in other contexts, especially things like occupational health and safety. What is a life worth? Juries in tort cases do this all the time. Regulators do this all the time. What do you want to spend to protect one life? It sounds cold-blooded, but this is regularly discussed. I personally prefer to phrase the same question a little bit differently, but we'll get the same answer. I have $1 billion or $10 billion or whatever to spend on occupational safety, cryptography, whatever. How am I best able to spend this to protect the most lives? Resources are always finite, always constrained. You have to make, as a society, you have to make the decision of how to allocate the resources. And you could say, I cannot protect everything because I can't afford to, or because trying to do so is going to have side effects. How do I want to allocate my resources? The plots that were foiled, yeah, a lot of plots foiled. I've seen many people question how serious some of these plots were. That said, a successful terrorist attack, the impact goes beyond the immediate lives destroyed. The Brussels attack is still on the front pages of American papers. And the policy implications are considerable. The 9/11 attack cost like $100 billion to the economy in direct damage and so on. we've spent a lot of money in the last 15 years building up a security and protective infrastructure. I don't know what the numbers are, but I think I saw just this morning that TSA's budget is about $7 billion a year. 7 times 15 is already pretty close to that 100 billion, never mind the rest of the upgrades to security intelligence. Is it worth it? I won't try to assess the utility of particular TSA security measures. I will say that the implications of an attack go far beyond the human and direct economic costs in both directions. There are people who will say that by focusing too much, you're giving the terrorists what they want. It's an interesting political science question. I've seen quotes from ISIS writings, Al-Qaeda writings saying, we want the West to overreact to persuade our fellow Muslims that the West is the enemy, and therefore they will join our jihad. Is that the right attitude? I don't know, but it's another way to look at it. So it's a very complicated policy question, but it's a legitimate one to ask. It's cold-blooded as it sounds. Yeah. What is the cost in lives? What is the cost in economic damages? What is the cost in policy? But all of this has to be factored in. And this is why we need this discussion, why we don't want it settled by one magistrate judge in California. Never mind that her ruling will be passed on then by the district court judge and the Court of Appeals, and maybe if it comes to it, the Supreme Court. Apple said they will take it to the Supreme Court if they have to. They hired Ted Olson, one of the top Supreme Court litigators in the country. You don't hire Ted Olson if you don't expect the Supreme Court battle.
Whose wife was killed on 9/11.
His wife was, yes, Olson's wife was on one of the planes, crashed on 9/11. No one will say this directly, but it gives him a certain moral gravitas that Tim Cook does not have when he speaks on this issue. Olson doesn't have to say, because everybody powerless knows. When he says this is not worth it to protect the terrorists, he can speak from personal loss and say that anyway.
So time for one more. If anyone has a final question?
No more questions?
Seeing none, we will congratulate Stephen. Great talk. Thank you.